Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge campus insider Ryan Harlan. We're coming to you guys after Oregon State has completed their fourth day of fall camp. First week is in the books as the Beavers will have a couple off days before getting into the second week this next week. Again, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Edge podcast. Ryan, you were at practice today, wrapping up day number 4. Obviously, we're going to get into the nitty gritty and kind of dive into each position group and kind of just give our entire thoughts on the first 4 days. But just what are some early impressions from you from these first 4 days, and how do you think the team is shaping up?
I would say at least from the offensive side, they're a lot more cohesive together as a unit than they were in spring.
Mm,
Spring, they're kind of learning things. The scheme, they seem to be, at least the quarterbacks seem to be a little more comfortable in the plays that they're running. And Ryan Gunderson kind of alluded to it a little bit, where it's like, hey, we're not making a ton of mistakes. There's still some that we're still making, but it's better than where it was back in March and April is what he kind of alluded to there. And then for the defense, they haven't really missed a step at all. They're flying around, they're making plays. I know Jaden Robinson was excited to get pads on
yeah.
yesterday. They had pads on again today. But like they're going out there, they're ready to compete, and I think that at least from what I've seen, the secondary in particular, they're definitely going to be a strength, and they continue to be a strength through the first week of fall camp.
Oh no, for sure. And I'd say, those are definitely some of the highlights that I've had from those first couple days as well. Is just the comfortability, as you mentioned. Obviously, the Beavers were installing a brand new offense in the spring, moving from a pro style over to Ryan Gunderson's more spread style. And I think that led to, some up and down play in spring. And not to mention, Gundy also talked about it was having all three quarterbacks healthy. That was something that didn't occur at any point in
Yeah.
spring, was having Ben hurt at the end, Jabari hurt at the beginning. So it was always kind of a rotating door there. So that's, I think, good to see as well. But overall, like you said, typical fall camp. Defense is ahead of the offense at this point. Just based on what we've seen, the offense still hasn't quite got the passing game dialed in from what I've been able to see as well, and what we've been able to see. But for the most part, no big like bad surprises. At the same token, no big great surprises yet so far. Do you kind of get what I mean there, Ryan? Do you agree?
Yeah, some good, some bad, not quite like not quite like overly cause for concern
Right.
yet.
Yeah, yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
where like a lot of like maybe cause for concern may happen is if things don't look like they're improving after the
Hmm.
first scrimmage next week.
Right.
So that yeah, it's kind of that middle ground where like you see some flashes, but also some things that still need to be ironed out in practice.
Totally. And yeah, let's go ahead and dive right onto the defense over the course of the podcast. Again, thanks for tuning in to BeaversEdge.com for all the latest that Ryan and I and TJ Matthewson have brought you guys this week. Make sure to head on over to BeaversEdge.com. That's where all the latest in-depth practice reports are. And Ryan, our practice reports have been getting glowing reviews so far this fall camp. So definitely want to head on over to make sure you're on the damn board and getting the full scoop. But let's go ahead and start on the defensive side. And let's start with the DBs because that's been probably one of Oregon State's more impressive position groups through these first couple days. We kind of knew that coming into the year that it was going to be the strength of the defense. The front seven was breaking in a bunch of new starters full time anyway, and the defense, obviously brought back a couple, or brought back, several experience pieces, added in an experience piece. So just kind of diving into that first big takeaway that I have is obviously we haven't seen Kobe Singleton get out there yet. And I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on because he is, essentially a Jaden Robinson 2.0 as far as being able to be like a lockdown corner on that other side. But outside of that, and then continuously just not knowing ultimately what Olton Julian's status is kind of a bit of a bummer heading into this year for both him and just fans who were hoping he would, kind of get back into that full swing. We haven't seen it yet. Not to say that it can happen, but he's still kind of been, doing his own thing, hasn't really worked into a bunch of live work. But other than that, I think the depth in the room is good, the talent's good, and even, some freshmen that have caught my eye, like Exodus Ayers, a true freshman, he's been in the mix from time to time. You mentioned Saiva Drawley, the Cal transfer. Didn't do a whole lot at Cal during his first year, but I would not be surprised to see him kind of working his way into that mix as well. So lots of depth there. I think the talent in that room is as good as it's been. Jaden Robinson, said back in spring that he thought they needed to get there leadership wise, but he felt the talent was closer to 2022 than 2023. So I think there's lots to like at secondary. I think there's a lot of good talent. Just need to see some more leadership beyond, those top end guys emerge. I think that'll be a good group.
Oh yeah, agreed. And both Cy and also Mason White too have been kind
Yeah.
of making the most of their opportunities with Kobe Singleton off to the side and I think even today like both of them were in the mix making plays and kind of being around the ball
Yeah.
as much as they could in those team periods and even today Jaden Robinson himself he had a play that reminded me of Trent McDuffie in the Super Bowl. For Niners fans, I'm so sorry. I'm a Chiefs fan through and through, so it was a great play to watch. Full discretion advised. But the way that like McDuffie blitzed off the edge and disrupted a play that would have probably been very successful had he not got in there and thrown off the timing of it. But like it was very similar. It was kind of like a little like screen pass, and he kind of got in the middle of that and that cut and lost a couple yards
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So it was very much all him on that play there. So it kind of reminded me of that. But
Yeah.
Robinson is definitely going to be the guy, that lockdown guy for any opposing team's number one wide receiver. And I think that this year for him, and he kind of said it too, when we talked to him the other day, was that he's kind of learning other things now within that scheme that Keith Hayward is running because it's more of like, hey, I know what I'm going to be doing, but at the
Right.
same time, like I also need to know what my teammates are doing around me so I can, not only do my job, but can help
Yeah.
them to succeed. And I think even if um, injuries do occur in the season, which they're going to,
Right.
I think there's not going to be a whole lot of like drop off in terms of production as we get into the season. Whenever Kobe Singleton is able to practice, I think that's going to be even much more of a
Right.
strength than what it has been from this week. But even today, I saw him kind of off the side working a little bit. So potentially, maybe we'll see if he comes in to practice and take some live reps next week. But as of right now, yeah, we haven't seen him throughout this first week. But maybe it might just be rest. Who
Yeah.
knows? We won't know probably until Bray speaks on his status next time that we see him.
Yeah, and to your point, Ryan, that'll obviously be Bray, after this first scrimmage this next Saturday. But yeah, another guy that I think is worth mentioning is Skylar Thomas. Obviously, he tore his ACL a year ago, and he's had one of the quicker recoveries that I've ever seen as far as someone who is able to get back in full speed of things. And I think he's going to be a nice addition for the Beavers at safety. I think he'll be a nice player. But yeah, totally like as far as like the DB group goes. I mean, I think Beaver fans should know that there's going to be some small subtle tweaks, but the Beavers are still going to be a very much the same DBs that we saw under Trent Bray, a man-to-man style. Like Keith Hayward's not going to come in and change a whole lot wholesale. It'll be uniquely his style, obviously, as it is with every coach, but there won't be a whole lot of schematic, systematic changes. I think that's why you've seen the defense kind of be ahead of the offense as a whole, early on in spring. But yeah, if there's one position group across the board that I feel really good about, it's DB for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think even Melvin Jordan was saying too that like it's very like the style of defense that Hayward is running and what Bray ran last year, there's not a whole lot of like for at least for him,
Yeah,
responsibility wise, there's not a lot that he's like changed or anything like that. So it comes from the same defensive scheme, very that like coaching tree. And they're very much on the same page. Sure, there might be some times where Hayward dials up different pressures, different
sure,
looks, asks his DBs to blitz a little more often or or drop into coverage.
sure, sure.
But like those are just small little things where it's like I think he's probably going to feel that out in game and make those adjustments whatever the opposing offense kind of brings.
Totally. And, moving on from there and going to the linebackers, obviously, four new faces are going to be starting this year full time after the Beavers lost both inside linebackers and both outside linebackers to graduation or to the portal. So now, while it's a new group, Ryan, we kind of already know how the starting unit is starting to flesh itself out. So on the inside, it's going to be Melvin Jordan, it's going to be Isaiah Chisholm. Those two guys are looking like absolute locks. We saw them get a run, obviously. Last year, Jordan more than Chisholm, but both of them got a chance to start in the bowl game against Notre Dame, and I think that was great for them. There'll obviously be some bumps in the road for being first full-time starters, but I think those two guys have fit that mold we've seen from inside linebackers in years past, whether that's Calvin Hart, Easton. You throw in Avery Roberts, throw in Omar Spates, just big bodied, can move side to side well, has some strength. Like what I've seen from those guys. Outside, definitely been a bit more interesting to watch, but it sure does look like early on, Ryan, that Olu Amatosho and Nico Taylor are the kind of the leaders in the clubhouse to be those edge rushers. So, like I said, overall, I think, they have high expectation, like a high bar to reach, right? Because John McCartan and Drew Chatfield were great last year at getting after the quarterback. Throw in Corey Stover as well on the outside. And then obviously in the middle, you had Easton and Calvin Hart playing really good ball in the middle. If there's an area that I think improvement just as a whole needs to be made with the scheme of the inside linebackers, it's something that I mentioned to you on day two when we were both there, was the inside linebackers being able to pass cover. And that is something that has been maybe the only real part when you look at Oregon State's defense is like, you looked at like, Easton and Calvin Hart or Avery Roberts, any of kind of their PFF coverage scores the last couple of years. They haven't been great, and that's not necessarily because they weren't great players, but just that the scheme doesn't ask inside linebackers to cover guys passing a lot more. This year, it looks like they're going to have those inside linebackers have a bit more pass covering responsibility, Ryan. Because I mentioned to you and to everyone that read the day two report, there was a moment when Trent Bray was coaching Isaiah Chisholm and Melvin Jordan, once covering the underneath button hook, where Jeremiah Noga had caught a button hook underneath those two guys and been able to cut it upfield for a first down. And then second, when the running backs are moving side to side on the swing pass RPO stuff. So I really do think that that linebacker crew, while unproven a little bit, the potential's there. And I've seen Bray coaching up that particular unit quite a bit. So, I like seeing that, and I think the talent's there too. What are your thoughts on the group?
I share similar thoughts on that, and I think they have the potential to be even better at being better pass coverage linebackers than those that
Yeah.
came before them, especially with kind of the depth that they have behind him. And Aiden Sullivan was a guy that
Yeah.
I was really high on after spring, and he has that ability to also go sideline to sideline. We didn't see a whole lot of like too much like coverage stuff from him, but he
Hmm.
has that ability to be a really good coverage inside linebacker. And I think that coaching that Bray has done is really
Right.
helpful too. I mean, even though, he's, has to pay attention to every other position, that's
Totally.
something where I think he's, emphasizing a little bit and being like, hey, this is something that we got to shore up, that we got to be better at. Otherwise, you're going to see probably some very similar results as of last year and the year prior. But I share some very similar opinions with you on that, and I think they have the opportunity. It's just putting it all together.
Yeah.
That's going to be the biggest thing for them. Is just putting it all together and executing that out in kind of a scrimmage or even game day type of environment.
Totally. And, another guy to mention too is Guy Reese Goodman. He's kind of been in the mix as well. How do you like the depth there, Ryan? Considering, and another guy on the outside is DJ Westlock. He hasn't quite been as ahead in the rotation as Nico and Olu, and that's kind of to be expected considering, he was coming over after a year at Missouri. So I think there's still, like you said, we need to see more, but the base, like the only thing I'd be curious of is I like the depth at inside linebacker a little better than the depth at outside linebacker. Outside of, DJ, Nico, and Olu, the outside is a little more,
Yeah.
questionable. But it's early. But it's one of those things where despite losing, you look at the offseason, you're like, hey, you lost four guys in the offseason, right? You would think you'd be in kind of dire straits the next year. Not as bad as you think. And I think that the Beavers did a nice job of having guys who they played last year being able to elevate internally, in addition to bringing in those two JUCO guys in Sullivan and Goodman.
Yeah, I like the depth as well inside linebacker. I'm a little more confident there, and even I think the depth kind of after Goodman and Sullivan can
Yeah.
also step up too if needed, if called upon. Um, yeah, it's really that outside linebacker spot that I'm kind of a little concerned about should
Hmm.
injuries occur. And it's not to say that a guy can't do that. And who knows what we'll see out of Nico Taylor and Olu
Right.
with a lot more run this year, as well as DJ Westlock, especially too seeing what Olu can bring because
Right.
I was high on him after the spring game a couple years ago, and he just kind of got buried
Right.
on that depth chart a little bit because it seemed to be any
He
time that
did.
he was, on the field and even in game two against Stanford, he just seemed to find his way into the backfield. And the fact that he didn't get a little more run last year, I thought that was kind of a little bit of a disservice to him, a little bit too, especially like if he's a guy
Fair.
that can come in and wreck some havoc.
Yeah.
That's something that I thought just kind of was a little, was a little kind of negative for him last year. But I think a little more run this year, kind of getting out those first team reps. Excited to see what he can do.
Yeah.
It's just I think somebody else outside of Westlock, outside of Olu, outside of Nico Taylor is going to have to
Needs to
step
come
up
up.
and take that spot and kind of be like, hey, I'm the guy to call up next
Right.
should something happen.
No, that's a great point on Olu. And, that was definitely probably very humbling for he and Nico Taylor. I mean, Olu obviously coming after an extremely productive stint at Wyoming where he tallied a ton of statistics and was like, I need to play some more better. And then Nico was, one of the top JUCO outside linebackers in JUCO. And both those guys, kind of sat and didn't have defined roles on the team last year. And I think, again, your points are extremely valid. I think a lot of them also are, um, you know, it's just it was unfortunate that they happened to have John McCartan, who was a what
Oh
seventh
yeah.
year senior, Drew Chatfield, who was a fourth or fifth year senior, Corey Stover, who was a 5 year senior, and those guys didn't leave the field much, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit with the offensive line. Same thing when guys don't leave the field much at those positions where there are only a few spots and you don't rotate, like on special teams or whatnot, it can make things a little different. So yeah, I mean, you go back and look at like Olu and Nico, limited moments in defense, more special teams work and all that, but now they're going to be asked for bigger roles. So I totally agree with you. But yeah, like you said, we need to see more depth emerge in the room. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Because the talent's there.
Yeah,
It's just I think everybody kind of putting the pieces together and we'll have an opportunity to see how much they've improved at the end of next week, at the end of week two, when they scrimmage for the first time.
totally, totally. And yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up the defense and move on over to the defensive line. Ryan, what have been kind of your early thoughts on that group? Another group that lost, Isaac Hodgins, James Rawls, Tavis Shippen, Sione Lolohea, and Joe Golden from the group last year. So I mean, more just like extreme veteran talent experience. It's a very green group up. Like just when you think about like guys who haven't had a ton of playing experience in general, like, that group still needs it.
Oh yeah, definitely. But kind of my early impressions, they've been able to get after the quarterbacks pretty well. And maybe that might just be also in combination too of like quarterbacks kind of wanting to run the ball or
Sure.
scramble, but they've been able to get consistent pressure. So that's a positive, I would say. And I know a couple guys who kind of stood out to me. Ty Hill stood out, the transfer from LSU stood
Right.
out, Nick Norris has stood out. Thomas Collins as well too. Thomas Collins has been brought up a lot by the coaching staff. He's very twitchy, off the line, very much a guy that I could see fill that Isaac Hodgins type of role, and he kind of joked around about like I think he was saying that like Hodgins called him his son or whatever after a press
Yeah.
conference or whatever. It was kind of funny, but like he could fill that kind of Isaac Hodgins role along that D line though. And all jokes aside, but like
Yeah.
I think that they probably won't match. It's still early, but they may not match necessarily the production that D-line had last year, but I still think they can get pressure. It's just gonna be the who's, the depth there and who's gonna step up, similar to what we kind of talked about with the outside linebackers of who's gonna step up, who's gonna kind of take that next step there along that front.
Yeah, no, for sure, totally. And I think if you look at if you head on over to BeaversEdge.com and you check out like our scholarship breakdown chart, you can kind of see how the defensive line's breaking out. And the questions I have for you, Ryan, is just from what I've seen too. We've pretty much seen everybody that's on, this chart get into the mix as far as scholarship guys. We haven't seen a whole lot from Kels Howard. We haven't seen a whole lot from Tavita Payom. What do you make of that?
Howard is a little surprising. I know he's
Yeah,
been dealing with injury. Tavita's gotten there a couple times,
right,
but not really. I haven't really seen a lot from
right.
him. But I've heard positives from him so far. But it I kind of need to see more from the two of them in order to get a better kind of
Yeah,
picture where they fit in within the rotation. But Howard in particular, especially too, because my understanding with his injury was he was going to be ready fall
yeah.
by fall camp, and I haven't seen a lot from him.
No,
So that's something that kind of keeping my eye on a little bit as well too.
as we move forward. Yeah, no, and like you said, Taiji Hill was a guy who caught my eye day one, excuse me, and day two. As far as the transfers that they brought in, Tavita played a little bit at Oregon, and when I say a little bit, I think one game. Nick Norris was obviously the transfer of Northern Colorado. He comes over, excuse me, with a lot of experience, and I think he'll be a guy that's in that mix. But Taiji Hill, he's got great size. He moves well. And you can just kind of see, Ryan, why he was at one point at LSU, just
Oh
physically.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
he's going to be a guy to watch. Samesi Saluni, not going to be the sexiest name out there as far as like, guys who people turn to, as he's kind of a real vet at this point who hasn't, like had like a real breakout season. But when Josh Gray is saying his welcome back to football moment this fall camp was when Samesi Saluni popped him in the pads, that tells me that dude's got the juice too. So I think Jacob Schuster, the transfer from Minnesota a year ago, he's another guy who's been pretty heavily in that rotation. Um, the depth is a little question, there's not a ton of depth at the position. But with the recent, like with just knowing that Takari was obviously going to be out for the year. You're just the depth is not quite as what it would be. But for the most part, though, Ryan, everyone else on this list has kind of gotten into the mix, and why it's unproven too. Like you said, they've been productive with what we've seen from our eyes these first couple days.
Yeah, and speaking of Saloni, like he popped off in spring too. He had a solid spring ball, along with Takari Hickle, but he's going to be out due to injury. But
Yep.
both him and Takari were wrecking havoc
Yeah.
along the D line, and of course, yeah, that's the offense is learning everything. But the fact that the two of them were getting pressure consistently and getting in that backfield where every time I looked up, I saw 45 and 43 get in there. That's something to keep an eye on, and I think he's gonna probably have more of an opportunity now after being buried behind
Right.
guys that have been there for a while, like an Isaac Hodgins and like a Joe Golden and Simon Sandberg before them. Like I think it's his time now
Yeah.
is the best way I can kind of
And I
describe
think and I
that.
think maybe his strength surprises people because didn't you catch that in Josh Gray's voice was just kind of like, "Oh." like Smissy kind of smacked me up a little. Like he was sounded like there was a little bit of like a mutual respect kind of a thing. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
gotta give
Josh
him
was kind of like,
credit.
"Oh,
Yeah, I
like
see
this
you, right?
we're doing this. Okay. Okay."
Yeah. So, for what it's worth, those are the little things that I like to pay attention to because, nobody has seen, other than I'm not gonna say nobody, but Josh Gray's seen a lot of defensive linemen over
Hmm.
his, playing career, and I think he knows, he's probably been hit by some pretty significant dudes over the course of, his few years. So, that all to say, the defensive line of the whole defense is the room, is the position group I want to see more. I'm satisfied with what I've seen at defensive back, semi-satisfied at linebacker. Defensive line, I need to see more just because the offensive line has been such musical chairs a little bit as far as like there's set in stone pieces, but still some pieces that are being moved around a little bit. And I think that allows the defensive line to kind of have a little bit of an advantage. But that being said, perfect transition to move on over to the offensive line, Ryan. This is one of those groups where it really does feel like we're working to find one spot and then working to develop the backup five units or the backup five guys just because since he's come over, as expected, Gerard Christian Lichtenhand has looked good, has looked every bit the 6'9" that he is, a massive human being, and I mean that in the best sort of way. Lockdown left tackle, Josh Gray looks to be the guy at left guard after he moved over. Van Wells was center throughout spring, hasn't really moved off that spot. Then we go over to the right side, and that's where things are a little more subjective, is settling in who's in at right tackle and who's in at right guard. We have a name for like Grant Stark will more than likely take one of those spots. So that just leaves one spot, Ryan. And you've kind of seen the names that have been thrown in and out. Who do you think right now is kind of the leaders in the clubhouse for that final spot?
It seems to be that Grant Stark has taken most of the reps at right tackle.
Sure.
Now I know it's only 1 week, but that seems to be kind of the case. Um, so if that's kind of an indicator, like I've seen him kick in a couple at guard a couple times, but for the most part, he's strictly been at tackle. And then
Hmm.
for right guard, mainly with the first team, like I've seen Flavio Gonzalez in there,
Right.
I've seen Tyler Volton in there. Well,
I think
so
Nathan
that's
Elu
what
got
I've
in there.
come.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little he got in there in some guard a little bit.
Yeah.
But like it also too, depending on the health of Jacob Strand, it's kind of more of a
Right.
who'll step up and fill that role there. But like I I feel like we're getting to maybe a point where the starting five for that first team is probably going to be more set in stone than any other
Right.
position group
Oh
out there
yeah.
outside
Totally.
of maybe a couple guys where where you can pencil in and be like, oh yeah, they're definitely gonna start like a
Right.
Jaden Robinson, of course.
Right. And
But
there's and
like,
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's something where it's like where I'm kind of like a little surprised by being at week one, but I really think Stark maybe takes that tackle spot, and then you might have Flavio Gonzalez or Tyler Volton maybe kick inside at right guard and take that spot.
Right.
Just more of based on what I've seen from weeks worth sample size. Now we'll see how things go next week and then week three, and then when they wrap everything up at the end before they officially close off practices and begin game week preparations. But just a week's worth of sample size, it seems like Stark is
Right.
mainly working in at tackle.
Right. And I think yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. Like if out of that mix, and I'll just throw in Flavio, we'll throw in Tyler Volton, we'll throw in Nathan Elu, maybe Luka Vincic, maybe Andrew Johnson. Just and even Jacob Anderson we've seen in there at times as well too. So we'll just make that group really big. If the Beavers determine that the best player coming out of that group is a guard, Volton, Vincic, Flavio, like a more true guard, I think we would see Grant Stark over at right tackle. If Jacob Strand, who I think is more of a true tackle in rather than a guard, came to be the best out of that group, I think we'd see Grant Stark slide towards right guard a little bit. And that being said, like you mentioned, as it sits now, I don't disagree. I think it looks like he's going to be more on the outside, and as far as at tackle, and then have one of those younger guys um, uh, slide in there. But to your point, a group that I think is very talented, and a group that like we talked about not on the podcast, but just in our discussions this week Right. In the case of like, Gerard and Van Wells, like it's the new way of this world where it's
Yeah.
like you come in after playing a couple years starting somewhere, you're gonna get slotted in to be a starter. So I think that's a big part of why we've seen what we've seen on the offensive line. And, honestly, since it's a small kind of, we're sitting right there, we can kind of transition over to tight end next, Ryan, from the OL, unless you wanted to add a last point there on the OL.
No, nothing on the offensive line. I think we kind of hit the nail on the head. But tight end, though, that's something that
Mm,
is kind of a big question mark. I
yes,
think
it is.
after Bryce Caulfield, because it looks like Jermaine Terry is going to be your tight end one, and then Bryce Caulfield's been that next guy up
Right.
afterwards. But the depth at tight end, they hit the portal a little bit and kind of hit and then in the recruiting cycle as well too of getting some guys in, filling out that room a little bit. It's kind of I kind of have that if I had to grade it, I have it as incomplete right now
Me
because
too.
I think they're trying to figure out who's gonna be the guy kind of after Caulfield and Terry. And they've thrown in some guys around there. I know Cooper Jensen and Gabe Milborn, some holdovers from last year, have gotten some run. TJ Zimmerman, Andy Alfieri have also gotten some run as well too. Andy likely will be a little more of a blocking tight end, similar
Yeah.
kind of responsibilities of what we've seen from like Atikin Quatoriano, Jermaine Terry a little bit last year. But Alfieri can catch as
Yeah.
well too. I saw him catch like a 3 yard crosser route for first down, kind of getting around in space and kind of being able to pick up the first down and move the chains. But I think I need to see a lot more is kind of the best way I can describe the tight end room right now.
Yeah, no, and I don't really have a whole lot more to add to that from what I saw when I was there. Obviously, I think it's a fair assumption to think production will not be as good as it was last year. Obviously, I mean, Jack Velling set the bar very high, and the Beavers didn't exactly replace him in the aggregate. Jermaine Terry, again, the potential's there. Didn't necessarily show it last year. At times, even Riley Sharp kind of passed him on the depth chart. So it's a big kind of like prove it year in his final year for me with Jermaine Terry. So, like Ryan said, don't want to go too deep into that because we've got the other position groups where there is stuff that we've seen and want to get into. So, let's go ahead and hit on running back real quick because the two big topics that I want to still hit on is receiver and quarterback. So, running back, it's actually been, kind of a real cut and dry thing too, where it's been Jam Hank, 1A, 1B, 1A, 1B, kind of going back and forth. Ryan has mentioned very astutely in his reports that Jake Reichel has probably worked his way into maybe a specialist rotation. I don't think he's going to go out there and get 5 to 10 carries a game, but maybe in spots. And then got to shout out the two freshmen, Cornell Hatcher and Salahadin Allah. Those guys have had moments and more than I would have thought for two true freshmen in fall camp.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. They've been getting some work in early, which is a little surprising. Reichel will probably play a little more special teams
Yeah,
than like be a significant like factor in the rotation. But like I can see him, in a short yardage situation or a goal to go situation where, he's in there as a power back
right.
and can fight
Totally.
his way through for a couple yards. He has the size and he has the speed as well too to get out and make defenders miss. He
Hmm.
he reminds me a little bit of like the power back kind of style like of Damian Martinez, but more of like I think a little more dynamic. I mean, Martinez is talented in his own right, but I think he brings a little more to that power back role, Reichel, than Martinez did, in my opinion, just from what I've seen from these first few practices. But that's kind of like yeah, it's pretty cut and dry for the most
Yeah.
part.
And
Yeah.
and as we've said, again, for more detail, I mean, Ryan has done a great job, TJ and myself as well, kind of articulating what we've seen from those running backs. And again, you can check all that out at BeaversEdge.com. We'll go ahead and wrap up with the quarterbacks. So let's go ahead and talk receiver too. A lot of players in the room, Ryan, but interestingly enough, the top end guys are starting to show out already, and there hasn't really been a whole lot of changes with kind of the first and second units. Obviously, now that Darius Clemens is healthy, I think he is going to be your go-to, your stud, your quote Isaiah Hodgins type in the room. That is the talent that he has. We need to see him do it more in practice, but I think that's the raw skills we're seeing. Jeremiah Noga, Trent Walker will probably be right beside him. We've heard that it's probably not going to be likely to see Jimmy Valson this year, which is unfortunate, given how he was Oregon State's leading returning receiver. And then after that, it's kind of a mixed bag between, Jemai East, Jalen Holmes, Taz Reddick, Zach Card, who's been dealing with an injury, David Wells, Montrell Hatton, and then Jordan Anderson and Malachi Durant, the young guys, in the mix as well. So I think there's a lot of kind of the behind those top three guys that still need to be worked out, Ryan. But as we sit now, I'd be really surprised if they don't go out there with Clemens, Walker, Noga to start the season. It just
Oh,
seems
oh
like
yeah.
that's the veteran group that's shown quite a bit.
Oh yeah, and we'll see more from Clemens as he gets more practices under his belt and is a little more comfortable at being out there making those contested
Sure.
catches. But the potential's there. Like I've seen a few where ball just kind of slips through his hands a little bit, but that's something where I'm like he can catch that. Like
Right.
9 times out of 10 he catches that. So the thing where I think we'll see a lot more. But yeah, I absolutely agree with your assessment of the receiver room.
Would you say also too, and it was something that I think it was Trent Walker said when we talked to receivers, I believe that was Friday or Thursday. One of the two, they're all kind of blended together at this point. But when he's like, yeah, the room seems more athletic and physical now. Would you kind of
Yeah.
agree with that assessment?
Oh, I would
Yeah,
agree.
I would for
I would
sure.
agree. There's a lot like you lose a little bit of speed, but you make up for it in height
Yeah,
as well too. And that physicality, and that was something that I think a lot of Beaver fans were knocking on the receiver room a little bit, where
clamoring
it's like,
for. Yeah,
yeah, it's like, hey, yeah, you can throw to Anthony Golden, Silas Bolden all day, but DJ is 6'4", 6'5",
like really tall. Yeah,
and that's really hard to accomplish. Like it doesn't matter how
totally,
good they are. It's like you need a guy that can go up there and catch a 50-50 ball against the DB or safety
totally,
or even in double coverage too potentially.
totally.
Like you need a guy like that. So
Totally. And Beaver
yeah.
fans will remember quite well. Like I said, I threw out the Hodgins comparison, and that's not a knock on you, Isaiah. Like, like Isaiah did great things, but in 2019, Oregon State, scored, won 5 games. Obviously, they were 5-7, but that offense that entire year was vertically Jake Luton to Isaiah Hodgins, whether that was double
Yeah.
coverage, sometimes even triple coverage. Like
Yeah,
you just
the saying
sometimes
of F it, Isaiah
yeah.
Hodgins is down there somewhere.
There's the origins, man. The origins
Yeah.
of the saying. But yeah, so more to watch there. But I like what I see from the group. We got about a couple minutes here to finish off with the quarterbacks. While y'all listening have probably been like, come on, guys, get to the quarterbacks already, and totally understood. We had to keep you guys
Yeah.
in suspense for this episode of the Edge podcast. But as ironic as it is, kind of to turn that statement on its head, Ryan, it's been Ben Gulbranson and the Gulbransonites to this point. Like
Yeah.
Ben has been the guy in that room, and that's not even us being overzealous, one practice, dramatic. Like through 4 games, if you didn't pick Ben Gulbranson to start a game tomorrow, I would probably say, are you seeing things behind closed doors that we haven't seen? And that's
Mhm.
not negative to those other guys. It's just his
Yeah.
experience is showing being able to execute a new offense against a first team defense, if that makes sense. That's what I've
Yeah,
seen.
that makes sense as well too. And I've seen more, I think a more complete picture from Ben of being able to show off the deep ball a lot more than both Giovanni and Jabari in practice. And that's something that's a little eye-opening to me. They've been able all of them been able to connect well on
Sure.
those short intermediate passes, but you also got to push the ball down the
Right.
field sometimes as well too. Sure, you can dink and dunk your way through on offense, when needed, but like you need to also get vertical at the same time, and that's something we haven't seen a whole lot from the other two yet in
Yeah.
practice.
I
Yeah.
think that's going to be something to definitely keep an eye on this week. And obviously, as we get into the scrimmage, I think we're going to know more about quarterback. But big takeaway
Yeah.
there, Ben is the guy, the leader in the clubhouse right now.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And that's what I've been saying. It's yeah, it's only 4 practices, but at the same time, though, first scrimmage should tell you kind of everything of where this quarterback battle is going to be. And right now, Ben is kind of taken over from where he left off in spring. And the thing with Ben, like despite the injury too, that was something that I found really surprising that he kind of just picked right up afterwards, where I was like. what I'm seeing from the quarterbacks is exactly what I saw in spring.
Right.
So there's at least not that much drop off between him sitting out for those couple weeks due to injury. And it's really a testament to him of in this scheme that Gundy is running, where it's a very quarterback friendly offense where anybody can kind of plug and play
Hmm.
and be able to pick up the terminology really quickly and just be able to get the ball out of their hands quickly. And I think that's where he succeeds. I think that's where Ben really succeeds at. And he even showed off his mobility as well too. While he's not a dynamic runner, like Giovanni or Jabari, he can run. He
Yeah.
can run. That's something that's part of his game. People forget. He said it a couple when he started that 2022 season that that was something he wanted to work on to throw off opposing defenses.
Yeah.
And
And
he's been able to do it. He's been able to use that to his advantage.
totally. And I think with, with Ben, just, I know that there are, a lot of Beaver fans that, look at it, in the pure aggregate and said, well, this is a guy who was third string last year. Why should you be excited or optimistic about what he's going to bring to you as a starter and the next year? And from that perspective, I understand. Now, that being said, I feel like y'all have to trust what Ryan and I have been able to see with our own eyes at practice these first 4 days. And in spring, when you guys were able to see two at the spring game, this is a markedly different offense than what Brian Lindgren and Jonathan Smith were running. You're talking about pro style, quarterback's going to be a statue in the pocket most times. I know we had some design DJU run plays and things like that, but it wasn't like they were actively asking DJ to take off and run, not necessarily working in the RPO game a ton. More long developing pass plays downfield that required, precise route running and extreme precision from the throws. Now we're into something that y'all might see more from a, high school type spread system or some of the spread systems we've seen in college. Obviously you have to look back at where Ryan Gunderson made his coaching chops. He made his coaching chops as Chip Kelly's quarterbacks coach. And, before that was, at San Jose State with Brent Brennan. Between Brent Brennan and Chip Kelly, those guys run a spread system. They don't run a pro style system. So I'm not going to say that Ryan Gunderson from his time as an Oregon State player when he played here some 20 years ago under Mike Riley. He was a pro style quarterback himself, local kid from just right up the road. So he will, there's not to say that he's entirely spread, but from what I've seen, Ryan, Oregon State's offense is going to be a lot more spread, and it's going to be the exception, not the rule, for the quarterbacks to even snap under center. I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot of that in spring, and I think this new system has quarterbacks make quicker decisions. It has quarterbacks make quicker throws, and has quarterbacks make more in short to intermediate throws and letting those guys get into space, which is something that I think, to your point about Beaver fans clamoring last year. I think there are a lot of Beaver fans who are like, we got a lot of fast guys. Why don't we let them get in space and get out there and run? And that wasn't really part of the offense last year.
No, and that was something that I think that's where like regardless of who was behind center, regardless of DJU, Chance Nolan, even I'll throw in Tristan Gebbia, Jake
Yeah,
Luton, and even Ben Branson
yeah,
as well too. Where I thought sometimes the offense ran into trouble was those long developing plays where the O-line
agreed.
can only sit back in pass protection for so long and
Yep,
keep opposing defensive linemen away from the quarterback. There's a reason why offensive linemen love to run block.
yeah,
There is an
it's
exact
true.
reason.
It's true.
So that's where I think the offense ran into trouble sometimes, and especially too last year where you had speed at all three receiver spots, and that's something where like you should take advantage of the
Right,
strength that you have on offense. And it seems to be that Gunderson is seeing what he has in his receivers, his running backs, and even tight ends as well too, and saying like, "Hey, we're gonna get the ball out to you in space. You're gonna make the first guy miss, and you're gonna go make a play."
right,
That's exactly what kind of what the scheming of all the short intermediate routes is. And sure,
right.
there's been a couple times where they push the ball downfield, but I think you're going to see probably more of attacking that lower part of and that lower part of the coverage for any defense more
Sure.
so than kind of going over the top uh like in a vertical style type of offense, that pro style offense.
Right. And I think, yeah, you hit it right on the head again, Ryan. I think, that was another thing that like I'm trying to think. Ben had above average wheels, more than you think. Obviously DJU could move. Obviously Childs could move. Jebbia wasn't a statue in the pocket either. Jake wasn't quite as mobile, being 6'7".
Yeah.
That's just Jake. But that all being said, and Chance Nolan obviously pretty mobile too. If there was one thing, Ryan, that I thought the offense just missed the boat on entirely, and maybe it was this last year, because last year I think they had the best guy for it, and he never hardly did it, was run RPOs or run the read option game. And, you know, when I look at guys like Damian Martinez and DJU a year ago, maybe you didn't want DJU taking his hits, and they
Yeah.
did do a
That's
pretty good
fair.
job of limiting how often he got hit. But that being said, like, who are you going to pick as a defensive end, picking whether to go with the running back or the quarterback in that instance? And Ben is quick enough to be able to run the read option too. And I'm trying to remember if we saw a little bit of him pulling the ball during that stretch when he went 7-1 as a starter. There may have been a time or two where he did.
Probably maybe a play or so
Yeah,
that
but
I
it was
can
still pretty
probably think of.
limited.
Yeah.
I would just like to see, and we've seen it so far, whether, there's going to be action, play action, read action, whatever it is at the snap. And then the quarterback is shifting to his right, shifting to his left, and making plays on the run sometimes. I like seeing that too. That was another thing that I've
Yeah.
seen these first couple days. And that being said, what you mentioned earlier, Branson has the deep ball throwing down. McCoy and Johnson, in my opinion, have looked best when throwing on the run. So
Yeah.
that being said, if there's a room for those two guys to kind of grow into, those guys can make plays on the move. And not to say
Oh
Ben
yeah.
can't, but those two are just they've got more foot speed than he does.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. It's not to say Ben can't make, a play on the run as well either, or both McCoy and Johnson can't push Ben for that
Right.
starting spot. Like they absolutely can. It's just a general summary of what we've seen from these first 4 days, and really like I think that like this more passing game, this quick passing game, I think is a little more friendly for to get the
Yeah.
ball out of the hands and get the quarterback into rhythm early, because I have my own gripes about what Lindgren said last year about getting DJ into a rhythm, and that didn't really happen a whole lot throughout the course of the season, where it's like you want those short throws because that builds up your
Yeah.
quarterback's confidence.
Yeah. And to
Yeah.
that point, though, Ryan, and again, I'm just going to be like, we've had fun with this, but now we've said it. I'm going to be a little snarky for just one fun, like, maybe your quarterback can't get into rhythm when you don't know what series he's coming out each game.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just I wanted to see Childs get rhythm too, but the way that it came in was so,
Yeah.
odd timed. Like I said, that's my one
Yeah.
gripe, but
Yeah.
purely
No,
joking
I share
sense.
share
Yeah,
similar to that as
purely
well.
fun sense
Yeah.
as we're closing out the podcast. But overall, like, we just, as it stands now, like I've said a couple times earlier in this podcast, I get it. You hear Ben Branson, it's not the sexiest name at quarterback for Oregon State. But from what I've seen in spring, what Ryan and I have now seen in fall camp, he does look like a guy who can efficiently run this offense. And I think as we sit now, considering that everything Oregon State lost and the fact that Oregon State lost, you know, um, their number one and number two quarterback from last year, to be a week into fall camp and be like, there's at least one guy who we feel at a floor is going to be good enough to get this team 6, 7, 8 wins probably. And, be in kind of that mix. I mean, there's obviously a whole lot to still dive into. But if all else, didn't develop or whatever, if I was, sitting in a Beaver fan shoes, I would feel confident that Go Branson could get me to a solid winning record this year based on what I've seen through these first couple practices.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I've seen as well too. And I keep hammering home, like, yes, it's only 1 week. We'll know more as fall camp progresses. So it's like
For sure.
take it with don't take it as the
Grain of
sky's
salt.
falling out. Yeah,
Yeah.
grain of salt. But also too, people forget Ben Branson won 7 games
Yes, he
as a
did.
starter. 7
7 and
one.
1. That's a
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
good mark.
I mean, I keep bringing that up. It's like he's shown that he's been able to win,
Yeah.
and
Call it game
make
manager,
yeah,
call it
game
whatever
manager.
you want, but
But
wins are
also too,
wins. Wins
yeah,
are
but also
wins.
too, my gripe with the game manager label is that it's exactly what you want your quarterback to do.
Yeah, fair.
It's like that's the one thing I hate about that label.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't want my quarterback to throw interceptions or turn the ball over.
Right?
I want them to manage the game and get the ball out to my playmakers' hands. And like
Totally.
I've never liked that label.
Yeah.
I
And
never have.
yeah,
But
and
yeah,
that's
all that aside of like he can run this offense effectively, and that's something that I think both Gunderson and
yeah,
Bray are
are
looking
seeing
for in their quarterback, whoever they're going to pick to start. That's what they want to see is
totally.
somebody that's going to put the offense in the best position to succeed. And right now, through a week, that's been Ben so
Yeah.
far.
No, and I couldn't agree more. And again, like I said, that there'll be a lot to get fleshed out here in the next couple weeks. You all are watching this podcast on a Sunday, so the Beavers had today off. They will also take or they will not take tomorrow off, but it will be a closed practice on Monday. We will be back on Tuesday, so make sure to stay locked into BeaversEdge.com. It's some combination of Ryan, TJ, and myself will be at practice going on the rest of this week. What's the biggest thing, Ryan? We'll just kind of close up this way. Ahead of the scrimmage, biggest thing that I'm looking forward to seeing this week is how the defensive line rotation settles out. That's my big thing is I'm curious to see who those kind of leaders in the clubhouse are. Is it experience? Is it size? Is it playmaking? What do they value the most in that group? So I'll be watching the D line this week. How about you as we have scrimmage next Saturday?
I think I'll be watching tight ends in
Mm,
particular and seeing who's going to be that third guy that steps up, but also too quarterbacks as well,
yeah,
seeing how
quarterback
they
stuff. It's true.
respond and how
Yeah,
they look in like live because I think that'll be a big tell. But tight ends is going to be my biggest thing because the tight end rotation is still not set
no,
yet behind Jermaine Terry and Bryce Caulfield yet, and so there's not really one guy that I can kind of point to and say this is the guy to step up if an injury were to occur in that room. And
totally.
that's just kind of how it's been through these first four practices. And I'm like also too, I get that. Like you haven't gotten guys in there yet and in the system. They're probably Andy Alfieri, TJ Zimmerman, the new guys that have come in, they're
Hmm.
all learning that system.
Right, right.
So that's probably something where they're gonna have to get up to speed a little bit as well
Totally.
too.
And
So
I'm curious to see, once it actually gets to game day with that point, is just how John Boyer, adds his own, you know, um, tweak to the position. Obviously, as far as like, quality of position coaches leaving, Waz was a very good position coach, as same with Jim Mahalchek. And I'm just curious to see what John Boyer's kind of own spin is on that room, if he can kind of get the most out of Jermaine Terry, because I think there's an awful lot of potential. You look at Jermaine Terry's size, the way he moves with the ball, just everything, and you're like, there needs to be more production there. So that's a great one too. And I think there's going to be a lot to kind of ultimately be further built upon this week. Pads will obviously be on for more days, and as we kind of get deeper into it, and um, yeah, I still think there's a lot to like, but after one week, there's definitely a lot to like and a lot, to clean up, sure. But overall, I think for the most part, Beaver fans should feel pretty good about where Oregon State is after one week as the season approaches. So I want to go ahead and give Ryan a big shout out for joining me on this edition of the podcast. Ryan's been a rock star at all 4 days of camp so far. He'll be back this next week, along with myself and TJ, as I mentioned. So looking forward to getting down there again with you, Ryan. Definitely
yeah,
this week as we get
likewise.
practices and scrimmages, and obviously it's really going to be getting into the nitty gritty of true camp these next 2 weeks before we really start to turn the corner and start looking ahead to the start of the season. So big shout out to everybody for listening to this edition of the podcast. Ryan, I'll catch up with you this week, my man. Appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, next week's gonna be fun. It's my favorite time.
Oh, it
Like
is.
I've said, it's my favorite time of the year, and I
It
can't
is.
believe that Season's gonna be here before we know
I
before
know
we know it.
it's exciting, and for anyone
Yeah.
that's listening, make sure to feel free to head on over to the damn board and drop any questions you've got for Ryan and I. We'll get back there, answer and talk with you guys as well. So again, big shout out to Ryan Harlan for checking out and joining me on this edition of the Edge podcast.